And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Thursday, September 15th, 2016. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today, as you probably picked up from the background chatter when we were going into our show intro here. And I have been assured that our toll-free numbers will be back. A toll-free number, singular, will be back next week. Apparently new boxes and, let's see, and let me just tell our control room something. Anyway, the boxes are showing up for the new equipment that's going to plug in, and we're going to get our toll-free number back next week. But for today and tomorrow, the numbers to join our show, 512-716-1603, 512-716-1883, and 512-716-1897. And Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Quick little program note, the lovely Lady Clay will be joining us in hour number 3 tomorrow, and at this point I think I have to go ahead and get a name for that gecko on the back wall, because he's getting more fan mail than I am right now. In fact, he even got a donation, and I think the fandom is going to his head because he already went out and bought himself a Bugatti Veyron. For those of you not watching on BAM User, it's a Hot Wheels car. So we're going to have to come up with a name for the gecko on the back wall here. He's part of the show now. What can I tell you? All right, getting into some more serious things here. Hillary Clinton is back on the campaign trail. She flew to Greensboro, North Carolina. She just finished her little presentation there. And the question is this going to convince people that she is healthy? And once again, she has released a letter from her personal physician saying she's fit to serve as president. Now, just for a moment, stop and think. If it turns out this doctor is wrong, what happens? Nobody's going to sue for malpractice. Nobody's going to take this doctor to court and say you lied to the American people. It's an easy bluff here. And, she had this small crowd in Greensboro, maybe 300 people, I think. Clearly a memorized speech. She's out there trying to prove she's healthy. Normally, I will tell you to turn the sound down and watch the body language. Today, it's the reverse. Turn the sound up, because what gives it away is the weakness in her voice. She clearly does not have the energy that she had only a couple of months ago. And it undermines this whole dog and pony show, in my opinion. And we don't know if she's going anywhere else after Greensboro or heading back to New York. But the corporate media is out there saying, see, she's fine. And what about Donald Trump? Donald Trump has released his medical records, and it turns out he's slightly overweight, which we already knew. And he's taking medications for cholesterol, which people of his age generally tend to do. So there wasn't really anything there. And again, all we're getting from the Clinton campaign is a letter from a doctor saying we should just trust the doctor because we know how trustworthy doctors are. They don't lie about the health of a presidential candidate. They don't lie about the safety of vaccinations. They don't lie about the fact that whether or not you've got cancer and so forth and so on. Donald Trump, in one of his rallies, which had a much larger crowd than Hillary, I might add, came on out and he basically hit the nail on the head. Hillary Clinton lacks the stamina to lead a rally, let alone the Oval Office. And he's pointing out the fact that he was in a room, was 122 degrees, and he's up there for long time. Hillary was only on that podium in Greensboro for maybe 10, 15 minutes. And now she has just wandered off into the back then again. So it's not a convincing display, not in my opinion. All righty, now more and more articles are coming on out regarding what could be wrong with Hillary. Little tongue-in-cheek is out there saying she's suffering from late-stage lying, and this came out as Zero Hedge, and basically saying we have to look at the comments coming in from medical doctors who are saying that as far as they can tell, she has Parkinson's. We had that story that came out yesterday where some of the Clinton insiders are anonymously leaking out that she has stage 3 Parkinson's. And this pneumonia story, of course, didn't fly because anybody who's had pneumonia understands you don't get pneumonia on a Friday and then you're back on the campaign trail, the following Thursday after falling down flat on a Sunday. So the story's already changed. Bill Clinton is out there telling everybody, he's still covering Hillary's rallies out there in the West and saying she only had the flu. So the story keeps changing here. And here's where it gets really interesting. As we have mentioned many, many times, what really has the Democrats worried are the upcoming debates. And they're trying to figure out some way they can turn it into more of a forum where Hillary Clinton will be asked some pre-selected questions to which she will have memorized answers with a little voice in her radio thing in the ear and not have to face Donald Trump directly. All right, we're going to take a quick minute here to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining our network. We're talking, obviously, about the campaign, Hillary's return to the campaign trail, which so far is one rally in Greensboro, North Carolina. And now we're seeing this story that came out of the Washington Post saying that Hillary might just say that she needs to skip all the debates because of her illness. And it's a desperation play to avoid having to have an honest one-on-one debate with Donald Trump. But again, in terms of the public perception, if she's not well enough to debate her rival for the Oval Office, then she's definitely not well enough to be dealing with foreign heads of states. Confrontation with political opponents is a major part of the president's job. And the Washington Post is out there saying, well, she's too sick to do that. So it's just, we'll ignore the debates and steal the election, and you should all be very happy about that. Now, the poll numbers are turning against Hillary Clinton. More than half of America is feeling that they are lying and covering up her health situation. The polls for the election are shifting solidly toward Donald Trump. And one poll came on out, and they were surveying people, why are you voting for Donald Trump? 2/3 of them said they didn't care about Donald Trump, they're voting against Hillary Clinton. And that is a perfectly valid reason to be voting the way you want to vote in November. Stop thinking about whether you've got a reason to vote for Donald Trump or not, and just look at all the reasons you have to vote against Hillary Clinton, and there will be a moment of clarity. Electoral enlightenment will descend upon your head if you just look at all the reasons the country has to vote against Hillary Clinton. Now, the corporate media is still out there trying to salvage something out of last Sunday's video, which wasn't supposed to happen, and apparently Hillary is angry with the Secret Service for allowing the camera to catch her stumbling, which tells us there may have been a lot of other stumbles that are simply being hidden from you. And once again, we saw this over here in the Daily Beast. They're back to pushing this idea that if you're questioning Hillary Clinton's health, you're just being a sexist. Because old men are supposed to look old and weak, and, when women get old, we're just going to shove them off here. And from a sociological point of view, there's a certain legitimacy to that. We evolved to keep on procreating, and once we're unable to go on doing that, evolution's kind of done with us. But it's completely irrelevant to the issue of who's going to sit in that Oval Office. And we're not being sexist and against women. We're basically saying we want to know that whoever's in that Oval Office, first of all, represents the will of the American people and not Wall Street and the military-industrial complex in Israel and all the rest of it, and that they're healthy enough to handle the job, because it is a high-stress job. We have seen presidents in the past, during the 8 years they're in office, how rapidly they will age. It's a very, very stressful job. And the issue isn't whether Hillary Clinton is falling down or not, because if that's all it was, she had a bad knee or a bad hip, it wouldn't affect her performance as president, because the president's job is to make decisions. And Franklin Roosevelt made decisions even in a wheelchair. John F. Kennedy made decisions dealing with his back injury and Addison's disease. The issue is if Hillary Clinton has stage 3 Parkinson's, She's going into the phase of dementia and delusions. And we're hearing more and more back-channel talk that the goal of the Democratic Party is just to have Hillary win the election so they can say, we elected the first woman president, and at that point, she's going to step down and the vice president will take over and do the actual job. But that's a very dishonest way of approaching this whole situation. But they're out there, they're just desperation on the cusp of madness. You know, you're sick for questioning Hillary Clinton's health. You're being sexist. No, we're not. This is our country. This is where we are supposed to choose who leads our country for our benefit, the benefit of our nation. And we have a right to know the real story about the health of the candidates. Now, another story has come on out. Remember, there are other issues besides Hillary's health. It's getting the focus right now, but we shouldn't let it monopolize our consciousness. Story out of Breitbart talking about Hillary's deplorables. After Hillary went on out and said half of Trump's supporters are deplorables, and it backflashed on her. People are already getting T-shirts saying, I'm proud to be a Trump deplorable. And then you go on out and you look at the people Hillary Clinton has been friends with and taken money from, foreign dictators, nations that sentence their LGBT population to death and imprisonment, female genital mutilation. Saudi Arabia won't allow women to drive. These, to me, are far more deplorable in the American sensibility than Trump's supporters. All right, we're going to take a phone call. David in southern England, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. How are you?
I'm doing quite well.
Yeah, very good. I have a question for you. As we know, we had a population in the year of 1900 of 1 billion people.
Yes.
Then we had World War I, we had World War II, and then the population in the 1950s went up to nearly 3 billion. Mm-hmm. And as now we're faced with, we are at the 7+ billion mark here in the year 2016. My question is to you, how much resources and infrastructure can the planet actually hold of human consumption?
Well, it's an open-ended question, and I'll tell you why. Because if you study history and population very, very carefully, you will find that population grows as an exponential function, but technology and infrastructure grows linearly, and every once in a while you'll have a crossover moment where the sheer bulk of the human population overwhelms the existing infrastructure. We saw that all over Europe during the Middle Ages, and because of the Great Plagues wiping out half to three-quarters of the population, is what gave rise to the Renaissance and a rebuilding and so forth and so on. Now, I understand there is a population problem, and there always will be, because sex is a lot more fun than dying. But as to the question...
Especially when you're dependent on the government to provide for people who have figured out that they can have babies and be provided by the government.
Well,
but how long can that structure last?
Well, first of all, you're talking about administration versus the actual mechanism of support, because how many humans Earth can support is an open-ended question, because we don't know what future technologies will bring. I mean, if you go back and look at the medieval period, and they were dealing with far smaller population than current, but they weren't able to support it because they didn't have the newer technologies that came on later. So we don't know what is going to be developed in the future that would allow the Earth to support far more of a population, or perhaps start migrating to the other planets here. It's right, kind of an open-ended question.
Right, because marginally we're supported by the population growth. Obviously, has been supported by the discovery of oil and its products.
That's part of it. That's part of it. Improvements in agriculture.
Because from 1900...
hang on, David. Let me make a point here. Okay, oil and energy was part of it. Improved medical care was part of it. The age of exploration, where the human population spread from the old world to the new world. The population density in the new world was far, far lower at the time, and that evened out. There are many factors that come into play here. And unfortunately, if you let government make the decisions about this stuff, they're going to start thinking about, population control and getting rid of the useless eaters. And I think the ideal path is for individual humans to become more independent and self-sufficient so that they don't become victims of some harebrained government policy down the road.
I understand that point. Obviously, we've never seen a growth like this in any time in the history of humans.
We don't know that.
From 1900 to
we don't know
the
that.
Current population.
David, listen to me. We don't know that. We only have a written history going back maybe 8,000 years, 10,000 years. We got cave paintings from 20 or 30,000 years ago. We have no idea what happened on planet Earth before the last great ice age. We know that humans have existed in their current form for at least 500,000 years. And we have,
I agree with that.
We have no idea what happened before that. The population could have been just as high, and they may have had a solution that we have yet to rediscover.
Right, but I'm going a different direction here. From 1900 to now, we've seen a 700% increase in human population on the planet.
Okay, well, like I said, sex is a lot more fun than dying.
But from what we know, we've never seen a growth like this, at least in modern history.
Well, as long as you qualify in modern history.
Yeah, but my point being is that we have been told that oil is from fossil fuels.
Well, we know that's not true.
Yeah, we know that oil is abiotic.
Yes. Well, no, that's not true either. Oil seems to be a byproduct of deep crust microbes. But again, if we're sucking it out of the ground faster than the microbes can replace it, it's still a problem. I would agree with you that we need to start looking at non-petroleum-based energy technologies. We know that the U.S. Army Laboratory has had a lot of success with the cold fusion concept. We know the technologies are out there. What is lacking is the political will to move forward. Because inherently, when you get a large government, what they are most focused on is maintaining the current status quo. They don't want to move forward into the future because it's going to upset all their donors and supporters who are still living in the past.
Right, I understand what you're saying. What I'm saying, because we know about Tesla was able to create energy out of thin air. Basically.
No, that is not what Tesla did. He was able to transform energy from one form to another that would transmit more efficiently, right, which was also what George Westinghouse was doing. He didn't create energy out of... Yeah, but you made a misstatement. Tesla did not create energy out of thin air. As much power went into his Tesla coils as came out. And there was a loss during conversion. It was not a 100% efficient transformation.
Right, but from your view, at the present moment, to live a good quality standard of life, how much population do you think currently that this planet can actually handle?
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that if the resources of the planet were evenly distributed, that this planet could probably support considerably more humans than it has right now. Our problem is not a technological one. It is a human nature one, in that we have these sociopath money junkies who believe they should have all the wealth. But they don't create the wealth out of thin air any more than Tesla created energy out of thin air. They have to take it from somebody else. And if you look at the poverty and hunger that is striking many countries around the globe, you will find that they are sitting under an immensely wealthy ruling class. Anyway, listen, we're coming up on a commercial. David, we're going to let you go. Thank you very much for the phone call and for the attempt to take us totally off focus during our broadcast. And that leads into this next story, because as you know, yesterday there was another leak of DNC emails which exposed a multi-million-dollar pay-to-play scheme within the Democratic National Committee. Not just the Clinton Foundation, the Democratic National Committee. We're going to take a break for some commercials here, and when we come on back, we'll be filling in more details on that. I forgot to put up the master volume there. And aloha, welcome back to our show here, and we're talking about the revelations from the latest Guccifer 2.0 Democratic email dump. And they're in a panic. The interim director, the interim chair of the Democratic National Party is out there saying, don't read this stuff. It'll infect your computer. Bad things will happen to you. Frogs will come into your bedroom and nibble on your fingers and toes if you dare read the emails. And they're all a Russian plot anyway. I mean, just their desperation on the cusp of madness. So that is a huge, huge story. So what is the corporate media doing? Oh, Donald Trump, we've got to find out about his health records. And those gosh darn conspiracy theorists, they're just wrecking things for all of us here in the establishment. Yeah, and we're going to go on doing that too. CNN actually claimed just hours after that email dump hit the internet, CNN reported to their mind slaves that they had read all 678 megabytes of the new documents in just a couple of hours, and said, dispatch doesn't have anything damaging regarding the Democratic National Committee. You don't need to read this stuff. We have read them for you, and there is nothing in there. Yeah, actually there is. As a matter of fact, Facebook is censoring the story where DNC leaks with like 39,000 people reading are being taken off the trending feed, replaced with stories about how there's nothing in the email with just a few thousand. They're openly out there trying to keep the lid on all this corruption, and they're failing miserably. That's why they don't like us. Now, there's a story that came out of the Daily Bell talking about Hillary deflates a setback for war. Yes, that's a big part of what's going on. They're now dealing with the reality that Hillary is in the process of self-destructing between the corruption, between the email, between her health issues, and Donald Trump could win and absolutely derail the U.S. war agenda that they have been trying to build ever since 2003. It is a major setback. And they're asking, why is the inner government, the deep state, so intent on a new world war? Well, I don't know. Maybe like Dave, they think the world is overpopulated and we'll just have a nice world war and that'll clean it out. But again, it goes back to economics. The U.S. economic system got lazy on the Bretton Woods deal. They've allowed our manufacturing to decline or simply move to other countries, like Ford has now moved all small car production down to Mexico. Donald Trump is wagging his finger at them for that, as well as he should. Without manufacturing, without agriculture, the only thing propping up the U.S. economic system is forcing other nations to use the U.S. dollar and charge them interest on it. That's what's driving this war agenda. For the Middle Eastern nations, it's forcing them to sell their oil only for the U.S. dollar. And the big war is trying to stop the world from switching from the U.S. dollar over to the ruble and the yuan. That's what it's all about. They're risking the incineration of the surface of planet Earth in this argument over whose brand of ink and paper the world will use for the next 100 years. The polls are now coming on out post 9/11, 16. Trump is up 5 in Ohio, up 3 in Florida. He has now overtaken Clinton in Nevada. Democrats are concerned Colorado is slipping away to Donald Trump. The numbers are not good, and they are in a panic. And I've mentioned before how the Hillary campaign likes to project. Whatever she's accused of, throw it onto Trump. Hillary's health is in question. Let's see Donald Trump's doctor's report. Corruption at the Clinton Foundation. Well, we've got to investigate the Trump Foundation here. And as it turns out, New York's chief law enforcement officer, Attorney General Eric Schneiderman, is, in fact, launching an investigation into Donald Trump's foundation. There's a little bit of a wrinkle there because he's a Democrat who serves on Hillary Clinton's leadership council in New York State. He works for her. WorldNet Daily tried to contact Schneiderman's office to comment on what is clearly a conflict of interest and basically got the big silence. So they're just thrashing. They're defensive now. They're starting to lose this. We'll be right back. And and Aloha America, welcome back to the show. Now, in the last segment, I was talking about how the Hillary Clinton campaign is following a pattern of projection. Whatever Hillary is accused of, they throw it onto Trump. You know, Hillary's health in question, well, we need Donald Trump's medical records. Corruption in the Clinton Foundation, well, we need an investigation of Donald Trump's foundation. And after all the pay-for-play revelations that came out of the Clinton Foundation and the State Department, what are they doing? They're going to try and throw it on Donald Trump. Newsweek, no less, is out there with an article how the Trump Organization's foreign business ties could upend U.S. national security. Newsweek didn't seem all that concerned about national security when it was the email scandal, did they? And they're out there saying, well, his sprawling business empire, that's a conflict of interest and that's a compromise here. Newsweek seems to have forgotten that by law, a serving president must place their entire personal wealth into a blind trust, while President Donald Trump won't know where his wealth is invested, so it cannot influence him. Now, some presidents have tried to cheat the system, which was the most likely motive for the murder of White House Deputy Counsel Vince Foster during the Clinton administration. But in theory, it's a good idea, and in my opinion, it should apply to every single elected or appointed official in the government. Because we know there's an out-of-control insider trading problem with Congress. They even voted down a special law that was going to say Congress can't engage in insider trading. Oh, no, we're going to vote that down. We're making way too much money. Now, then there's an article we just put up at WhatReallyHappened.com, and it's talking about Dr. Milton Wolfe, who's a board-certified diagnostic radiologist from Kansas, and he took a look at the letter released by Hillary Clinton's doctor, assuring us that she is perfectly fine, and in going through the description of the tests that supposedly Hillary underwent, he's found some problems. He says there's stuff there that doesn't make sense. There are tests that are not done the way they're described in the report. And finally, he says, Hillary Clinton's doctor says that Hillary Clinton has non-contagious bacterial pneumonia. And he points out correctly, because if you look in any medical textbook, there's no such thing as non-contagious bacterial pneumonia. And if there was, how did Hillary Clinton get it? Now, the reason we need to pay attention to Dr. Milton Wolfe is he's Barack Obama's cousin, once removed. So it's not like he's on Donald Trump's team or anything. All right, let's grab a phone call. Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Hey, that first caller about population. I want to see zero population growth in the Bushes, the Clintons, and the neocons.
I would agree with you.
Negative population growth.
And let's include all the sociopaths and the money junkies. Yes, if you want to talk about trimming out the human population, let's trim out the ones who are causing all the damage.
Yeah, because we're not going to get to a point, I think, that we need to worry about population growth because where we're headed, there might not be no population.
Well, you know, humankind has been on the verge of extinction before when the Toba supervolcano exploded 65,000 years ago. DNA tests are showing that the entire global human population was reduced to just 8,000 individuals. And again, humans in the form that we are in have been around for 500,000 years. We have no idea what happened before the last great ice age. Because the glaciers would have erased all the archaeological evidence of whatever it is they may have accomplished.
It's the same with this fraud global warming. There was no records after, before a certain point, so you don't know what happened. It's all frauds and liars. Just like the doctors.
It is. Now, there are ways to determine climate through secondary sources, tree rings, trapped gases, and so forth. And we know that the world was much warmer during the Roman and medieval warming periods than it is today. And in contrast to all the doomsaying that we're getting out of Al Gore and everything, those warm periods were periods of tremendous prosperity. Food was so abundant, humans had time left over to develop arts, science, architecture. the great flowering of civilization accompanied these warming periods. And so, this idea that if the world increases in temperature 1/10 of 1 degree in the next 100 years, it's the end of us all. It's just politics and, trying to get our money and our obedience again.
Hey, Hillary Clinton's got a lot of trap gas.
Yeah, okay. I would go with that. Yeah,
hey, Mike, I want to talk about Russia and China real quick. Hey, I know, we're never going to defeat them singly or obviously co-join, but what happens if Russia focused on, like, their naval and invested all their, because I know they still don't trust China fully. Every country's not going to give every country their own full secrets, in terms of military equipment. But what happens if Russia focused on naval more than the army, because China's got such a larger population, and then the Chinese focused on more army, marine style equipment to put money into, you know what I mean? So, because, when you got to invest money in 2, 3, 4 separate, you got to cut back on certain other things. So I was
well,
thinking,
we're seeing that here in the U.S. The U.S. has spent something like $5 trillion ever since they invaded Iraq, and we see the results of it every day of our lives with all the cracked pavements, the closed retail outlets, boarded up schools, hospitals and clinics have gone out of business. We're in a wartime economy. They don't want you to realize that because it might impact your vote in November, but we're living in a wartime economy, and it's pretty grim.
And did you see this? They said we spent like about $7 trillion with these wars, and it's just lunatic. It's a welfare and a warfare state we've become. Pretty much, we're Rome, and people don't want to discuss that. Well, you know what we are.
Yes.
Now, but it's just sad how this is what we've all got to offer. The economy's sinking, and we're heading for trouble.
Yeah, we definitely are. And again, my prediction for Washington, D.C. is that it is going to collapse the way the former Soviet Union did. We're going to have about 4 months where we're going to have to look out for each other, take care of our neighbors, our friends, and just really be independent and self-sufficient for ourselves while we put together a new government, and then things are going to be a lot better, just the way that life in the Russian republics is a lot better than it was under the former Soviet Union. And that, to me, is the most preferable option, as opposed to getting into a full-on nuclear war or, basically those are our choices right now.
Yeah, and it's either the economy collapse or the best light show in the history of the world.
Yeah, well, since I live real close to a first strike nuclear target right over yonder there, I really would like to avoid the light show because I'll be part of what's lighting up.
All right, thank you, Mike.
All right, thank you. We're going to switch over to Peter in Los Angeles. Aloha, Peter. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I just was going to call up, and there's a couple things that you were talking about. It's when they project, when the Clinton campaign projects whatever is going on, it just makes it seem like it's a quid pro quo, like it seems like it's an even playing field, when, of course, they're lying about Trump for the most part.
No, it's not evening the playing field. It's repointing the corporate media where the Hillary campaign wants it to point. And so that's why they're doing it. No matter what Hillary's campaign is accused of doing, no matter what she's accused of doing, no, the corporate media should be looking at Donald Trump and prove that he wasn't doing exactly the same thing.
Mike, it's interesting to point out that Newsweek, which of course did this thing on the Trump companies and all that, is owned by the husband of Jane Harman, the Israeli first-earth shill who was selling out to Israel over the United States. It's also, when you did your thing yesterday, your show yesterday, and you read about some of the people who contributed and got into these key positions all over the government. It's interesting to note what the names were. That's all I want to say. Look at the names of the people and look back and see how this is any different from Rod Blagojevich and the accusations that were made that Obama was selling his seat along with Rahm Emanuel. It's exactly the same thing. That's just what he was doing.
Yeah, I mean, right now, I mean, what is coming out of the Clinton Foundation leaks, what's coming out of the DNC leaks is the entire government is for sale. The whole point of winning an election is to gain control of things and sell them off for your own wealth. Like all those ranch lands out in the West are now leased to Russia. And they just stole them from the rightful owners and said, well, it's not yours anymore. The Russians are going to give us more money. We are a lawless land.
Yeah, that's right. And there's nobody, government policy is made by these arch criminals and thieves which own the government, and it's implemented by lesser criminals and, guys who have no experience and nothing else. And no wonder we're so completely screwed up.
Yeah. I mean, we've come a long way from the best and the brightest, and we're down to the worst and stupidest.
What a shame that it ruined a country that was significantly different when you and I were kids.
Yes, very much so. All right, well, listen, Peter, we're going to let you go here and get on back to the news. Now, as you know, Hillary is trying to recover from her deplorable comment. They're still trying to portray Donald Trump supporters as these white working-class Americans, like working class is a bad thing. And so the Los Angeles Times sent a reporter to pay a visit to Donald Trump's Southern California headquarters in Long Beach. And the reporter walked on in and was very surprised to find out a lot of the volunteers are not white. They're not working class. And so what did the LA Times say? Oh, it had to be staged. It had to be staged. I mean, we know that Latinos and blacks don't support Trump. It had to be. I mean, they're just not even trying to hide the fact that they're propagandizing the American people for Hillary Clinton. Now, up in Berkeley, UC Berkeley, there was a pro-Trump rally taking place, and apparently some of the liberal students got together and invaded the rally, shouting obscenities at them and basically shutting the rally down. Just throwing debris, causing a ruckus until the rally shut down. And I want to remind everybody that it was these exact tactics that were used by the brown shirts to bring Hitler to power in Nazi Germany. We're seeing Hillary Clinton use Nazi brown shirt tactics trying to shut down any rallies for Donald Trump. Now, that is not democracy. That's thuggism. And we need to be very, very careful about that. Somebody actually caught one of the news bimbos on Fox News saying on air about the email scandal, I can't say anything about it, I'll lose my job. Which is not a surprise. I heard exactly the same thing when I was going to the news affiliates 22 years ago about the murder of White House Deputy Counsel Vincent Foster. Not one of them said they didn't know about it. They all clearly indicated they knew the guy had been murdered, but they wanted to keep their jobs. You know, we're not going to risk our job just to tell the truth to the American people. You know, what's wrong there? Now, we're still seeing this campaign to portray all of this leaked information as a Russian plot. The Russians did this, the Russians did that. Homeland Security Chairman Mike McCall said yesterday that Russian hackers had penetrated the computer systems of the Republican National Committee. It's an evil, vile thing that they're doing. Unfortunately, the head of the RNC, Sean Cairncross, the chief operating officer, says they have absolutely no record of any intrusion into the computer systems at all. So now the Homeland Security chair has had to back off and said, well, he misspoke. The Russians didn't hack the RNC. But they're just out there pushing propaganda. And apparently they're unconcerned that they're making so many mistakes. It's only underscoring the fact that it is propaganda. Now, we've been talking about HSBC that was caught laundering money for drug cartels a while back, and they got a sweetheart deal from Loretta Lynch. And that's part of that whole narcocracy tying it together. But there may be a bit of a wrinkle there because apparently the head of global foreign exchange cash trading at HSBC has been arrested. And apparently they're investigating suspicions the Clinton Foundation has been involved in illegal offshore money laundering operations on a massive scale. It's the narcocracy. It's all drug money corruption. That's what's been controlling our nation for 30 years. Now, apparently the Director of National Intelligence, Joel Melstead, well, he was a spokesman for the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, is saying that they're refusing to carry out a damage assessment of Hillary Clinton's leaked email secrets. Now, this is a required assessment. Anytime a breach is detected, there's supposed to be an evaluation. And they're basically saying, nah, we don't need to do that here. There's nothing there. They're scared. And again, it gets back to this question, and it's a legitimate question, based on the prior history of the Chinagate scandal from 1996. Was Hillary Clinton selling U.S. secrets to foreign interests using her weak private email server to deliver the goods and her charitable foundation to collect and launder the money? It's a valid question. It deserves to be asked. It deserves an answer. And when you look at how the machinery of government and corporate media just don't even want to go anywhere near this, it's very, very telling. Meanwhile, Representative Adam Kinzinger of Illinois is out there saying it's time for the media to stop covering all this email and hacked emails, and really there's nothing there. You shouldn't be looking at that. Well, the corporate media is already trying to back away from it, but that's what you got the independent media for. We're going to have this stuff out here for you to look at and to read and decide for yourself, and not let some member of Congress saying, there's nothing there. Or CNN, well, we read it all here in just an hour, and there's nothing there. They're in panic mode. You can just absolutely tell they're in a panic mode right now. All right, we're going to take a break for some commercials. When we come on back, FBI Director James Comey is going to start crying. He's so unhappy, and I'll tell you why when he gets back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show now. FBI Director James Comey, who, by the way, was on the board at HSBC while all that drug money laundering was going on, was giving a talk at a Center for Strategic and International Studies yesterday in which he lamented the loss of public trust in our cherished government institutions like the FBI. And he said it's all the fault of social media and Twitter that are just saying all these bad things about us, and we have to do something about that, you know, so that people believe in our institutions. Well, Mr. Comey, I have a news flash for you. It's not social media that has destroyed the reputation of the FBI. Letting Hillary skate on felony violations of Title 18 has harmed the image of the FBI. Claiming that you let her go because she didn't have ill intent when Section 793 of Title 18 says ill intent is not necessary has harmed the image of the FBI. COINTELPRO has harmed the image of the FBI. Ignoring British double agent Dusko Popoff's warning of the attack on Pearl Harbor has damaged the image of the FBI. All we're doing out here in the social media is reporting on the facts, as is our right under that First Amendment. And if you, Mr. Comey, want to improve the reputation of the FBI, I suggest you actually do your job. Now, Comey isn't the only one who's whining and crying over this gosh darn social media and all those bloggers. They're just ruining things for the establishment. Yes, we are, and we're going to go on doing it, too. Article out of the Daily Bell. Hillary loses control of the net narrative. And part of the mistake there was going on the attack against Breitbart and Alex Jones and the independent media in general. And basically, this article is conceding the propaganda by the elite is being undermined by the availability of alternative sources of information out here on the Internet. And the influence of the independent media, their words, is becoming overwhelming. They're finally realizing that we are winning the war for the minds of America. Of course, we're cheating. We're using the truth. So that's where we are on that one. Now, one of our callers a little while ago was talking about the intense amount of corruption that's been going on in our country. And I want to go on back to 2012 when Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker survived a recall election, just barely. He was out there trying to basically tamp down the public workers' salaries, cut back on their pensions, and all of this was a fallout from the mortgage-backed security fraud collapse of 2008. And politicians across the country, rather than pointing their fingers at Wall Street for having caused the mess, turned around to all pensioners and said, well, you're demanding too much. And Walker was one of those. We got to take a break here for top-of-the-hour station identification. More about Governor Walker and his latest scandal after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. And again, the toll-free number is going to be here next week sometime, I've been assured. If you want to join us on the air, the numbers to call in are 512-716-1603, 512-716-1883, and 512-716-1897. If you get a recording, it means the phone line is busy. You can try a different number or wait a few minutes and call back in again. We're talking about Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker. Back in 2012, he faced a recall election over his handling of the collapse of public pension funds following the collapse of Wall Street's mortgage-backed security fraud in 2008. And the public workers were very unhappy. They stormed the state capitol. There was a recall election that he just barely survived. Now we're seeing this story coming out of RINF.com, where documents released to The Guardian in Great Britain are calling into question the fact that Walker and his supporters may have engaged in questionable, possibly illegal fundraising, using dark money to hold on to his office. And here's another good one, okay? Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker and the GOP-controlled legislature approved a measure aimed at retroactively shielding paint makers from liability for lead paint laws after the billionaire owner of a lead producer contributed $750,000 to a political group that provided crucial support to Walker and Republicans in those recall elections. Wisconsin had laws that fined lead paint makers for damages caused by lead paint. And during the recall election, they got a donation from a lead producer and changed the laws to say, no, you can't sue the paint makers anymore. It's all for sale. It's all for sale. All right, so let's turn to the war zones here. Syrian terrorist groups, meaning the U.S.-backed rebels, have opened fire at Russian army soldiers north of Aleppo that are there to protect the road that is supposed to be bringing humanitarian aid into the city. And basically these U.S.-backed terror groups have already said they're not going to comply with the Syria ceasefire deal. And it goes even worse than that. Russia Today is reporting the U.S. is failing to deliver on the Syria ceasefire deal, and they want all the details classified to show the world what the U.S. said they were going to do and wound up not doing it all. In fact, the Russian military says Damascus, meaning Assad, is the only party that's following the agreement at this point. Now, we have seen emerge from declassified State Department documents, leaked emails, Hillary's emails, over and over and over again. It's been confirmed that the U.S. was arming and supplying and training Al-Qaeda and ISIS. And a lot of people are looking at as possibly being treasonous activity to provide aid and comfort to an enemy during a declared war on terror. So Wolfowitz is out there, again, trying to do the projection thing, saying the U.S. didn't create ISIS. Oh, no. Bashar al-Assad created ISIS. And obviously that's why ISIS is in Syria trying to remove Bashar al-Assad. Right, Paul? They're just out there saying whatever they think they can get away with, and they don't even care if it makes sense anymore. And it has to. For propaganda to work, it has to produce a coherent believable, self-consistent alternative reality to supplant the real world. Then people will fall for it. Unfortunately for the government and fortunately for the American people, most of this stuff coming on out is the product of advertising agencies and public relations groups who institutionally don't think beyond the end of a given campaign. After 30 seconds, 60 seconds, a week for a campaign, it all goes out the window and they start over with a new idea. And that's why people are saying, wait a minute, this stuff is not making sense with what we were told a month ago. And the attitude of the U.S. government is, forget what you were told a month ago. No. Now you need to know that this. And it doesn't work that way in the real world. I spent a lot of years in advertising. The early part of my career in computer animation was in advertising because only advertising had that kind of money in the early days of computer animation. And I got to see a lot of how this stuff works. And they're blowing it, which is good for us, bad for them. Now, there's another article out of Counterpunch talking about why are we in Syria anyway. And according to Robert F. Kennedy Jr., he is basically saying that the decision to remove Bashar al-Assad and replace him with a U.S. puppet goes back to the moment Bashar al-Assad rejected the Qatari pipeline. And that was back in 2009, and as soon as Assad said, I don't want this pipeline, he became a target. Same thing with the Taliban up in Afghanistan. A consortium of oil companies wanted an oil pipeline at a cheap price. The Taliban said, well, no, we're going to charge you fair market value for the pipeline right of way. And this oil cartel consortium went to Congress and said, it's going to be cheaper for us if you just invade the place. And one of the people on this oil company consortium representing UNOCAL was Hamid Karzai, who, following the U.S. intervention in Afghanistan, became the puppet ruler of Afghanistan, El Presidente de UNOCAL. We're going to take a moment here to shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. We're talking about the various wars and war zones and the real reasons behind all this bloodshed and grief and horror and misery all over the planet. And it's all about money. It's all about oil revenues. It's all about protecting the U.S. dollar. And they're perfectly happy to just send your kids off to be killed and crippled by the millions if need be. Now, Argentina has called for high-level talks with Britain about the Falklands over at the United Nations. And this goes back to what I think is probably an example of chest thumping. The Falklands just aren't that big a deal. But Great Britain says they're ours, and Argentina says they're ours, and they actually fought a war over that back in the 80s. And now they're reopening that particular situation all over again. There's not much in the Falklands outside of sheep. All right, well, if you're an American taxpayer, you're probably going to be delighted to know that you're going to be paying even more money in the future to keep apartheid alive over there in Israel. They've reached this deal for the $38 billion over 10 years, and this is the largest foreign aid deal the U.S. has ever made for Israel to buy weapons to use on Palestinians, and it still isn't enough. Senator Lindsey Graham is out there saying it's not enough. We have to take more money away from the American people and give it to Israel. Let's just shut down a few schools. Yeah, we don't need that bridge to be repaired. You know, people can just drive slowly across it. We've got to give all of our money to Israel. Lindsey, you've got a checkbook. Dip into your own pocket for a change. Man, oh man. We got to get these Israel firsters out of our government. We really, really do. Now then, over in Ohio, there is a former mayor, Richard Keenan. He was mayor of Hubbard, Ohio between 2010 and 2011. He's been indicted on 8 counts of rape and 12 counts of attempted rape and gross sexual imposition involving a 4-year-old girl. She was 4 when he started. And he's literally out there saying it was her fault. She was a willing participant. Yeah, at 4 years old. We're going to believe that one. Now, he's pleading not guilty to the criminal charges, but he admitted what he'd done to his wife, his pastor, a social worker, and his brother and sister-in-law. Now, I wonder if this guy is on antidepressants or he's just being a typical politician. I mean, that is just absolutely infuriating. I have no understanding and no sympathy for people who engage in such behavior. Okay, there is now fresh Syrian fire hits the Israeli-held Golan. This is coming out of the Daily Star, and they're trying to spin this from the point of view of Israel. How dare the Syrians shell us just because we stole part of the Golan? What's wrong with those people? And that's exactly what they're saying. The Golan Heights belong to Syria. Israel invaded and occupied. There's been talk about annexing it. And how dare the Syrians decide that maybe they want to not be annexed down there in the Golan. Israel is now bombing the Gaza Strip yet again to prove how butch they are. There were 3 strikes against the areas of the Gaza Strip, and they didn't even have a reason for it. They just went ahead and did it to prove how butch they are. Let's take a phone call here. Rodney in Texas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Rodney, there you are.
Andy.
It's Sandy?
It's Andy.
It's Andy. Okay, well, it's that mutant hamster. He gets lazy on the keyboard.
Hey, no, I wanted to ask you, you're a knowledgeable person and whatnot. I just wanted to ask you, where did George Soros get his fortune?
You know, I have to be honest, I don't know, but I know he's got a big chunk of it, and I don't know whether part of it was inherited or not. At this point, I really don't care. I mean, he's obviously, played the game very well in Wall Street. My concern is Soros and every other billionaire who think having that kind of money grants them a right to treat this planet and the people on it as their personal playthings, whether it's George Soros or Bill Gates or these other people.
Well, let's give this some thought. Okay, once we went to fiat currency, I mean, the central bank could just punch some buttons on the computer and give money to anyone.
Yes.
And George Soros happens to be a very good instigator of crime and whatnot. Do you think that's possibly where he got his money? I mean, that's kind of an inheritance, right?
I imagine that there's probably a lot of overlapping mechanisms, but I do know that our banking system does show favoritism based on political leanings. You know, people who are going to support them are going to get lower interest rates and loans forgiven more often. And those who are opponents to them will be basically sucked dry, because the whole point of keeping the population poor is to keep them helpless and unable to stand up against the oligarchs.
Exactly. Well, how about Bill Gates and the connection between him and IBM? Do you know anything about that?
You're talking about the very early days?
The very early days.
The very early days. Well, my understanding is that Bill Gates actually bought the DOS from another programmer completely and then was able to make the deal with IBM, which was struggling to catch up with Apple. And they basically made the deal where Microsoft got a residual off of every machine sold, and it was a sweetheart deal for Microsoft, but IBM didn't have a choice. They either went with Microsoft or they let Steve Jobs and Apple pull further ahead.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate your knowledge.
All right. Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. Now, China has issued a warning to Taiwan not to allow a visit by the Dalai Lama. And at this point, it almost seems kind of they're making a mountain out of a molehill. He's an 80-year-old monk. Yes, he's a separatist. He wants an independent Tibet. He's never made any bones about that. But I think China's actually calling more attention to the issue of Tibetan independence by kicking up a fuss than by just ignoring it with dignity. And it's not like there isn't going to be something else in Taiwan that's going to dominate the headlines anyway. They've got a major typhoon that's causing huge amounts of damage over there. Top diplomats from the U.S., Japan, and South Korea are going to meet to decide what to do about North Korea. Obviously, North Korea is not being invited to this meeting. And what's going on here is that Barack Obama has succeeded in destroying the tenuous relationship they had with the Philippines over this issue of how drug dealers should be treated. Now remember, Barack Obama is a president who does not hesitate to send drones into countries we are not actually at war with and just blow up random innocent people. And yet, he got very upset over the Philippines' decision to try and deal with the drug corruption in their country by simply gunning down the drug dealers in the streets. That's their country, and it's their decision to make. And Obama got on his high horse, and he chastised the president, and the president said, okay, we're going to ask your troops to get on out, and we're going to start buying our weapons from Russia and China instead of the U.S. So if Obama was planning on using the issue of the Philippines and the South China Sea as his backdoor to war with China, he just lost that. And that's why they're all starting to gang up on North Korea. North Korea will be our backdoor to war with China because we've got to get rid of that yuan, especially the gold-backed yuan. It's the enemy of everything we hold dear in the United States of America, meaning those pretty printed pieces of paper coming out of the Federal Reserve. Now, the House of Representatives has voted overwhelmingly to block any more releases of prisoners from Guantanamo, including the 20 that have already been cleared for release. House Resolution 5351, introduced by Indiana Republican Jackie Walorski, passed with 244 votes in favor, 174 opposed. The reason they don't want these people released from Guantanamo is we know from somebody who was released before, Binyam Mohammed, far worse things have been done to these people than waterboarding. Their bodies carry very telling scars. They are an embarrassment to the U.S. before the eyes of the world. And that's why the House is going on and saying we're going to keep them locked up until they just die. Multiple human rights groups, including Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch and the American Civil Liberties Union, have launched a campaign to urge President Obama to pardon former National Security Agency contractor Edward Snowden. It's a good idea. He deserves it. I remember a time when being a whistleblower was something to be proud of, and being a traitor wasn't considered a prerequisite for holding elected office in this country. And today it's completely reversed. Law-abiding citizens, those who are trying to do the right thing, are punished, and the guilty are protected. James. And it will not happen because right now what the U.S. government is more afraid of than an informed general population are more whistleblowers, and they are out there. And so they have to make an example and say, you know, you don't dare talk about what you know, or you're going to spend your life living in the Ecuadorian embassy in London. So Obama will not issue the pardon. If he does, it'll be on his last day in office when he just won't care any longer. And I hope he does. I would like to see pardons for Edward Snowden, Leonard Peltier, he just had another birthday, Mumia Al-Jabbar. All of the victims of our corrupt system deserve an immediate pardon. So let's talk about the economy now. Things are not doing very well. Let's talk about Wells Fargo. As you know, there was a big, huge scandal, one of many. They've also been caught in laundering drug money again. But this was the one about the fine of $185 million by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and other regulators because Wells Fargo had a program of creating accounts without authorization for their customers to boost their sales goals, receive bonuses, and churn the accounts to make more money for themselves. And some 5,300 employees have been fired in connection with this fraud, and the CEO is refusing to resign. The executive in charge of this whole churning operation has retired with something like $125 million golden parachute. What kind of a society are we living in where the obvious criminals are being treated so well? It's a criminal society. A criminal government yields a criminal society. The narcocracy has poisoned our entire system all the way down to the basement. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials here, and when we come on back, more about the economic news. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And before I take this next phone call, I just want to point something out to all of you. When these banks get caught engaging in fraud and they pay a fine of some kind and nobody goes to jail, or maybe somebody retires with a $125 million golden parachute, who ultimately pays for all this? You, as a customer of the bank, ultimately pay for it all. Lower interest on your savings account, if you still have interest on your savings account at all. Higher fees for services. They always pass it on down so that people who are completely unconnected with the fraud are the ones who pay the costs. All right, let's go to Chip in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Chip, are you there? Going once, twice? All right, I guess Chip hung up. Getting on back to the economy here. Moscow and Tehran are working on opening a joint bank to boost investment and trade between their two countries. They will not be going through the U.S. dollar. They just announced that. Now, down in Zimbabwe, you probably remember Zimbabwe became notorious for out-of-control inflated currencies leading to paper notes that actually said $100 trillion on them. And it was out of control, and Zimbabwe dropped the notes. There was never a quadrillion-dollar note, which is a shame. I wanted one for the wall. And they started pegging their currency to the U.S. dollar. Well, apparently that's not working out for them very well, and so Zimbabwe is going back to printing its own dollar notes, and they may be looking at delinking from the U.S. dollar and giving their own economy another try. Now, we've been talking about pensions, certainly in the context of Scott Walker. We know that there's a pension crisis all over the country. How did this come about? Well, it was very simple. Back in 2008, during the mortgage-backed security fraud, Wall Street's pet ratings agencies rated these mortgage bundles AAA, which made it legal for pension funds to invest in them. Now, pension funds, retirement funds, anything dealing with the elderly American have serious restrictions on them because their clientele are people who are too old to start all over and rebuild their lives again. And so they're constrained to AAA investments only. And Wall Street's firms declared the mortgage-backed security bundles as AAA. The pension funds all invested in them. The fraud collapsed, and pensions were defunded all across the country. And politicians don't want to point the finger of blame at Wall Street because they need Wall Street to seek higher office. And they simply turn around and say, you pensioners are demanding too much. You're living too long. You're just this unexpected cost. Now, up in Chicago, where they have a major pension shortfall, their solution is another tax on the people. The residents of Chicago are going to be taxed to replace the money that once was in Chicago's pensions and is now in the pockets of the Wall Street bankers. Sort of reminds me of that cartoon, you know, where the outhouses one on top of the other. The leaders, and then you. All right, I guess we've got Chip in North Carolina back. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I called today to see if you could explain to me exactly what's going to happen with this internet turnover of the IP or the names. Also, I'd like to find out if you think that certain websites might go offline, and would it be possible for us to still access those internet sites using the FTP addresses?
Well, you can certainly use the IP addresses as long as the server is not using what's called virtual domain naming, which is where one IP services several websites. My website is set up to be reachable by the IP. I set it up that way.
What is that number?
Okay, you know, I'll tell you what. We're going to have to take a break for commercials. Stay on the line, and I will come back and give you that information. As far as the transfer from the U.S. to ICANN, it's really being overblown. The rest of the world has wanted the U.S. to let control of that for some time. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Chip in North Carolina. Now, first of all, the U.S., which basically created the Internet, the ARPANET, has up until recently maintained control over the IP address space and domain naming. And for a very long time, the rest of the world has been saying it should be handled by an international body. So that's basically what this transfer is about. Is managing that namespace. Now, the only way you can disconnect a domain from its IP is you have to hack what's called the DNS, the domain name system. And probably when you're setting up your computer, they said you had to get a DNS server put in there, which is a computer that takes the name, WhatReallyHappened.com, and maps it to the actual IP address, which is how it finds the physical hardware. So in the case of our situation, I've set up the server for WhatReallyHappened.com as a single-user server. This use of IP to reach a website doesn't work with servers that host multiple domains and actually use the domain name to choose which directory they're going to when the HTTP server serves up the paper, but the page rather. The number for WhatReallyHappened.com, if you want to write it on down, is 173.236.29.251, and that will take you to the main page. Is it possible that they'll try and shut the Internet down some way? Well, they can't shut it all down. Because too much of our economic activity is now online. So what they have to do is find some way to justify shutting off independent media selectively without raising the problems of First Amendment violations. And we already know that Hillary Clinton's talking about it, where we're seeing this is becoming a constant theme coming out of the federal government and the corporate media, that they're absolutely terrified that they can't control the minds of the population anymore, and they're trying to figure some way that they can do that. But
well, that's what I was thinking.
Well, you know, it's been tried before, but ultimately people who want to know the truth are going to find their ways around those blockades. China tried to impose Internet censorship some years ago, and it didn't work because people who wanted to find the truth were always able to find ways around it. The only way you can silence an independent media outlet, is go in and physically destroy the machine. But you can buy a new machine and set it up again, even with a different name. It's not going to go away. And what's really interesting, there are a lot of parallels between what's going on today and what happened when Gutenberg rediscovered movable type printing and made books affordable to the middle class. Literacy exploded. The population was better informed. Those institutions that could evolve and adapt to a new reality of a better educated, better informed population survived. Those institutions who couldn't adapt and adjust went extinct. And we're going to see a repeat of that. And back in Gutenberg's time, they were desperate to try and get it under control, try and smash all the printing presses. The first person to do an English translation of the Bible was literally burned at the stake for doing so. That was before Gutenberg's version of the Bible came on out. It actually triggered the King James Bible, because by the time of Gutenberg, every church had rewritten the Bible to suit whatever their own particular theology was. Some of it was a little bit out there. And people were going from one church to the next and saying, wait a minute, this isn't what the last priest was saying. So they had to unify all the religious texts, and that's what led to the King James Bible.
Okay, so you don't see much of a problem with that.
I don't think they can pull it off. And I'm going to keep on doing what I do, until they find a way. Well, they're trying all the time. They're trying to crash my server on a daily basis now.
Yeah. Yes, they are.
Yes, they are.
Okay, Mike. Well, I sure appreciate your time, and I love your show. You keep going.
All right. Thank you very much. And, we're going to keep on going until either the nation is restored to a true republic with a democratically elected government. That's it. That's the goal here. Now, Donald Trump was out there wagging his finger at Ford for moving the last of its small car production down to Mexico. And remember, all these auto companies, they got all this money during the auto bailout following the 2008 mortgage-backed security fraud crash. And they took all that taxpayer money, and instead of creating jobs for the American taxpayers, they used the money to build new factories in other countries. And Donald Trump has this line that he keeps repeating to immense laughter, saying, you know, it used to be cars were made in Flint and you couldn't drink the water in Mexico, and today the cars are made in Mexico and you can't drink the water in Flint. And he's absolutely right. That is a real measure of America's decline. Now, over in France, the labor reform strikes have come on back. It was a major, major problem. They're back again. Because even though Parliament has approved the labor reforms, the unions are still not happy. Because the labor reforms are basically all at the bidding of the European Union Commission, which is to lower wages and salaries and cut benefits in order to give more money to the European Central Bank. And so the French strikes are back. Good for them. It's causing all kinds of chaos at the airports. Meanwhile, over in Germany, violent crashes continue to break out between locals and refugees in these German towns. And Merkel is on the verge of unleashing literally the army to pacify the unruly public. How dare you not do what I tell you to do? And the mayor of Bautzen, Alexander Ahrens, has said that this is all because of Merkel just opening the borders and not having any caps or controls of people coming on in. And this includes the arrests of people who are linked to ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and he's saying this is Merkel's doing. Now, Germany and a lot of the other countries in the European Union have been trying to deal with this rape epidemic with some pretty lame PR stunts. Anti-rape tattoos, wristbands, posters. To nobody's surprise, none of it is working. In fact, those wristbands, I don't want to be molested. The rapists are collecting those things like trophies. They'll have 10 or 20 up the arm. Look at this. It's amazing here. Bavaria's interior minister is out there chastising Merkel because of the arrest of refugees linked to ISIS. It's an ugly, ugly situation. And a lot of it's being driven by George Soros. Now, one of our alert listeners sent in an article where apparently Soros' main leap into billionaire status came from a little stunt he pulled with the Bank of England some years ago where he shorted the British pound. And he made a huge amount of money. And in the process, the British pound suffered and the British people suffered. And you can read the whole story because it's up there on WhatReallyHappened.com. But George Soros, I guess he's hitting the panic button. His dream of a global government and a single golden throne of planet Earth on which his butt will be sitting is in serious trouble. And he's out there literally issuing a warning to Europe: accept refugees or face extinction. I mean, that's a pretty extreme threat to be making. What are you going to do, George? Nuke the whole place? The people of Europe are concerned that they face extinction because they're being overwhelmed by all these people from all these other countries. Now, the White House has set a new goal of 40,000 additional refugees from the Near East and South Asia. Just bring them all in. They're just trying to blur all the different groups together so they can drop those borders. And they're very upset that all of the problems being caused by these refugees and illegal immigrants and the rest of it are actually triggering a strong nationalistic fervor all across Europe and even here in the United States of America. There's literally an agenda to erase our cultural, regional, ethnic, religious identity. They're even trying to get us confused over which bathroom to use over there at the Target stores. Now they're trying to, they banned the Confederate flag as a symbol of hate. Now they're trying to ban the Gadsden flag as a symbol of hate. That's the flag used by the Tea Party and a lot of American patriot groups because it's a symbol of the American Revolution. But that's why they want it gone. People just aren't going along with that model there. And again, it represents the core failure of liberalism. This idea that if they just control the environment to a fine enough degree, that our brains will operate the way they think they should operate. All of this goes back to Margaret Mead's Coming of Age in Samoa, which claimed that the Samoans did not go through the trauma of adolescence, hence it was a product of the environment and not human nature, except the book was a fraud. But it's still the foundation of the entire liberal political philosophy. Margaret Mead is still lionized, but she made so many mistakes in the book, it's been discredited. And that's why, despite all this unisex nonsense and bathroom nonsense and all the rest of it, girls still act like girls, boys still act like boys. And that's why this whole blend everybody together into a giant global clot of humanity with no sense of who they are is not working out. They want to destroy our sense of identity, because if you don't have a strong sense of who you are easier to control. That's the agenda behind that. Now, over at the Ninth Circuit Court, there's been a decision handed down which has serious ramifications for all these ranchers whose lands are being taken by the Bureau of Land Management. And the Ninth Circuit Court has just ordered the U.S. government to prove federal subject matter jurisdiction. And this is a very, very telling point, because up until now, the Bureau of Land Management has assumed subject matter jurisdiction. They simply go on in and say, we have jurisdiction over this property. And what really complicates the issue is that Congress actually passed a law some time ago saying that lands that the Bureau of Land Management were trying to control and own did actually belong to the private citizens. Remember, in the Constitution, they have that enclave clause. The federal government is not allowed to own land other than what is under federal buildings or federal infrastructure, like airports, harbors, military bases. And the reason the Founding Fathers did that was to prevent a situation of a government that gets itself into hideous debt, getting out of that debt by stealing the property of the American people and selling it as if it was their own, which is what our current government is doing, or they're leasing it up to Russia for the uranium ore underneath it in exchange for generous donations to the Clinton Charitable Foundation here. So, all right, we're going to take a phone call. Roseanne in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. I hate to keep on belaboring this subject, but you guys were talking about George Soros earlier, and I had read some articles last week on him that I found kind of interesting. His dad, he was born in Budapest, and his daddy was a prisoner of war during World War I and after World War I, and he escaped. But when he was in the prison camps, the prisoners learned a language called Esperanto.
Yes.
And then it says its creators whose hope was to allow people to transcend nationality and understanding and facilitate global peace. So his daddy taught him all this stuff and taught him that language. And then after the war, or after World War II, and he went to England penniless, and he really did pull himself up by his bootstraps, so to speak, and went through school, got a bachelor's, a master's, but he actually studied under a philosopher named Karl Popper, who's came up with the original term of open society. So those are the places that he's getting all this from. They're lifelong held tenets, so to speak, and that's why he's doing what he's doing. He is something he really believes in and he grew up with, and he thinks this is the way the world should be. And it's kind of interesting when you try to find out where people are coming from. It's like, what is wrong with this cat, and why does he keep on trying to undermine all these different countries? And it's because he has this view of the world that he wants everybody to be like this.
Well, throughout history, there have always been people with these fantasies of a utopian society. But that's all they are. They're fantasies. And just like the liberals miscalculating with Margaret Mead, there are practical considerations. First and foremost, the reason I'm opposed to a single global government is looking at the kind of people who aspire to office in our national imperial governments, like Washington, D.C., Brussels, and so forth. And the idea of having a single all-powerful ruler of the planet
is very naive at best.
It's very naive. They're not going to be good people. They're going to do anything they can to get that office, and once they have that office, they're going to do anything with it. Look at the model of the European Union, which was supposed to be a stepping stone toward that globalist utopia, and how...
Yeah, that was a dress rehearsal. That was a dress rehearsal.
And it was a
what
disaster.
They want to do to it.
That's exactly it. It began as a free trade zone, and then it mutated into this hideous dictatorship, and the same exact thing would happen to a global government. And that is why I think that humanity and civilization is best served by a world with 1,000 little tiny nations, all about the same size, taking care of their own people, and doing some trade and tourism across the borders, where nobody is big enough to be causing a problem for anybody else.
And how do you find out a character of a man? Give him power.
Yes, absolutely. Character is how they behave when they don't think anybody is looking.
Absolutely. Have a good one, Michael. Thank you.
Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. You know, like that mayor we were talking about, was sex with a 4-year-old girl? I mean, that's the guy's character. Anybody can pose in front of a camera or a microphone and put on a convincing show that they're a good person. Look at Hillary. How they behave in private, how they behave when they don't think anybody is watching, that is the true measure of anybody. And yes, you find out what people are really like when they get power. So, all right, we're coming up here on another commercial break. When we come on back, we're going to be talking about the Dakota Access Pipeline protests, efforts to control and censor the news on the Internet, politics and corruption, all that usual stuff that we have. Death, grief, sorrow, murder, followed by a fashion show. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And I guess we know where Lindsey Graham is getting his marching orders, because former Defense Minister Yalon of Israel is also out there saying that $38 billion is nowhere near enough. You Americans just have to come up with more, you know, because otherwise you're all just a bunch of anti-Semites who want Hitler to come back and gas the Jewish babies in the ovens if you don't give us all your money. Greedy, 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 greedy. All right, now then. We're talking about the Dakota Access Pipeline. The police have moved in. Arrests are being made. I've sent emails to some of the people I know who are up there to make sure that they're okay. Unicorn Riot is one of these organized groups that is broadcasting live video of the standoff. And they're now saying Facebook has been cutting off their link from livestream.com. And it's another reminder that those who are in charge of this social media platform are now presuming to decide for us what we shall see and what we shall hear. And I think at some point there needs to be a pushback. And maybe it's because they are privately owned companies. But we need to stop going through them. We need to basically take back our ability to communicate with each other and not go through these corporations, which are now openly and actively choosing to filter content to favor the government and the corporations here. Now, the corporate media is in trouble. As we mentioned earlier in the show, they're out there saying the independent media has just become overwhelming at getting the truth out to the public. Gannett just laid off more than 100 employees at their New Jersey media company it recently purchased, which explains the flood of resumes I'm getting in my email here. But no, if you work for the corporate media, even if I had the money to hire somebody, being in the corporate media is not what I would call a sterling recommendation here. So let's talk about human-caused global warming. It is now snowing in Tahoe here in September, and it's just a little dusting, but it's arriving early, as the Old Farmer's Almanac said that it would. Now remember, one of the major pushbacks by or rather propaganda pushes by Al Gore and his ilk, the Carbonazis, was this idea that the sea level is going to rise. It's going to rise up and it's going to flood the coastal areas. And, of course, Al Gore went and bought himself a new seaside house out in Southern California. So obviously he wasn't very confident of that whole situation. But we're looking at this article. This is from CNS News. There have now been 4 independent, separate studies looking at sea level, and they've all come to the same conclusion. There is no observable sea level effect from man-made global warming. We're going to take a break here for our top-of-the-hour identification, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our program, hour number 3. And once again, if you wish to call into the show, and I know we got a caller waiting right now, 512-716-1603, 512-716-1883, 512-716-1897. And we're going to go ahead and grab this phone call right now from Brendan in New York. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I just have a quick question with regards to the election and how they're handling this the Clinton situation. Do you think that Obama could cancel the election and declare some sort of an emergency if she is seen as too sick?
No, if she's too sick and is forced to drop out under the DNC rules, Bernie Sanders becomes the nominee. But I'm looking at all this talk about they're trying to convince the American people that Russians are hacking the elections, which would give them an excuse to disregard a Trump victory and say, well, we're going to have to hold new elections next year, the year after, the year after, the year after. At this point, anything's possible. The question really is, would the American people sit still for such an obvious grab at dictatorship?
Do you think that's why they're trying to put into the focus that the Russians are making her sick? I heard that on Alex Jones today.
Yeah, I mean, they're desperate. They're grasping at straws. You know, and it's gotten to the point where they look ridiculous. To ordinary people, they look ridiculous. And yes, Hillary Clinton still has her supporters who are fanatical about it because she's a woman. And, you know, Hillary has been running her campaign as a personality cult. And the people who are still supporting her are fanatical. They're ready to drink that Kool-Aid. You know, anytime she says that they have to. But they are a rapidly dwindling minority, and the real issue is we know how much massive election fraud was going on during the Democratic primaries that favored Hillary Clinton, and that alone undermines this idea that Russia is hacking our elections and working against Hillary Clinton, because if that were true, Bernie Sanders would be the nominee.
If they put Sanders up there, though, do you even think that he would have a shot against Trump, being that, you know, his socialist background?
Yeah, he was he was polling higher than Hillary Clinton. He was polling higher than Trump. But at this point, if Hillary is forced to step down either from illness or because somebody finally has a crime that they can't pretend didn't happen, whoever they put in there is not going to be able to overcome Donald Trump's momentum. I mean, his surge in the polls just since Hillary's little stumbling incident is showing it's shifting toward him very dramatically. I don't think there's anybody they could put into the Democratic nomination who would really stand a chance of turning this around right now.
All right, thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to let you go. Now, getting on back to human-caused global warming, we started with this story before station identification. One of the articles of faith, the most holy revealed dogma of Al Gore and his Carbonazis, was that human-caused global warming was causing the oceans to rise and they would flood the coastal areas and everybody would die horrible deaths. The polar bears would go extinct. Try and sell that one to those Russians in that Arctic research station where the polar bears are just giving them such misery right now. And, of course, Al Gore did buy himself a beachside house out there in Southern California. Anyway, there is this article that came out of CNS News. There have been 4 independent separate studies that have all concluded there is no observable sea level effect from man-made global warming. And what they do is they start out, first of all, by understanding that human contribution to climate is minuscule. Al Gore and his carbon Nazis have been trying to sell the idea that human activity alone shapes Earth's climate. No, it doesn't. The effect is microscopic compared to things like solar output, shape of the Earth's orbit, various other factors going on in there. What they did discover with these research projects is that in areas where they saw sea level rise, which was seized by the carbon Nazis to say, see, the world is doomed unless you give us your money and obedience, is they've documented that the oceans of planet Earth are actually very slowly sloshing back and forth from Atlantic to Pacific to Indian to whatever, which makes sense when you look at tidal effects in general. There's going to be a resonance buildup, but it's a microscopic effect. But it's a natural, not human-caused, oscillation. And they say when you take that one out, when you take that factor out, there's no observable sea level effect that can be attributed to man-made global warming. That's just where they are on that. Now, the carbon Nazis are not about to give up. They see human-caused global warming as their path to more of your money and more control over your life. And so there's a video from YouTube. We put it up at WhatReallyHappened.com where they're talking about damage control in the media. Because everybody is now getting their own little weather stations. I have one here. We're keeping track of our own temperatures. We're looking at the snow that's already starting to fall. And they're kind of stuck. We're going to take a second here to do a shout-out to our honor affiliates who are rejoining our network. We're talking about human-caused global warming, the ClimateGate scandal, and the fact that the global warming enthusiasts, if you will, are having to do damage control. The Old Farmer's Almanac has proven to be right yet again. Winter is arriving early. Temperatures are going down. Scientists are now in agreement. We're heading into a period of minimum solar activity, the grand solar minimum, where all these overlapping solar cycles are lining up at the low point. So do the carbon Nazis throw the towel in and say, all right, we were wrong about the warming? No, of course not. Of course not. They're out there saying, well, yes, the sun is going to cool, but the human carbon dioxide will overcome that. We're still going to have broiling, roasting temperatures out there. Or other outlets are still falling back on that old one, that human-caused global warming creates colder winters and more snow. Because the oceans are evaporating more because you're putting carbon dioxide out there. And they just thrash around and thrash around. Here is the bottom line. Back in 2000, the carbon Nazis were predicting snowfalls are a thing of the past. It didn't happen, did it? We've had several record-setting winters in a row. If they cannot predict what's going to happen in just a year's time, then why should we be listening to them about what they think is going to happen in 100 years? It's just another government cash grab. Now, surprisingly, over in France, Nicolas Sarkozy, who's taking another run for the presidency of France, has come on out and said that climate change is not predominantly caused by human activity. And he came on out and said, we got bigger problems than global warming. And remember what I said earlier in the show, looking at the history of the medieval warming period and the Roman warming period, these were times of historic achievement, the flowering of civilization. There was so much food everywhere produced by the warmer climate that people had time left over for art and music and architecture. These were good times in human history. It's not something to be afraid of. All right, we're going to grab a phone call. Ron in New York City. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I was just calling to talk more about Hillary's health and that body double.
Yes.
I don't think it's that woman that that makes a living doing it. I think she's tweeted out that it wasn't her.
Well, she also tweeted out a picture of Chelsea's house on her own account earlier that same day. And obviously, if you're going to be a body double for somebody, you're not going to admit to it. I mean, that's the end of the job.
Hey, but wouldn't it be a lot easier to just put makeup on somebody and keep it a secret?
Well, they did try.
Supposed to having her because she could be tracked easily,
Well, in this day and age of the Internet, everybody can be tracked. And yeah, they tried to keep it secret. Apparently she's been part of the Hillary team since 2009, but now it's out. And like I said the other day, it's not unusual for leaders to have doubles or celebrities have doubles. Saddam Hussein had several doubles. Jim Carrey has a double that he sends out to be seen in public from a distance when he doesn't feel like going on out himself. I mean, it's a very, very common thing that the rich and powerful do.
So what do you think? Do you think she's going to speak today? Do you think it's really going to be her that's going to come out?
No, when she was at Greensboro, that was the real Hillary. But listening to her voice, you can hear she's weak. She doesn't have the energy she had 2 months ago.
Wow. Did you see the email with Powell when him and the other guy, that billionaire, discussed her health? Yeah,
back in 2015, she could barely get up the podium. I mean, there's clearly an issue there, and today's trip to Greensboro was clearly staged to try and sell the idea that Hillary Clinton is still healthy. Her doctor came out with another letter saying Hillary is fit to serve, and these are the tests that I ran, only to have another doctor who happens to be Obama's cousin say it's nonsense. What she's talking about in this letter doesn't really happen.
You think she's going to be able to do the debates, or are they going to get out of there?
She's trying to get out of them because she cannot talk and speak extemporaneously the way Donald Trump can. They're trying to turn it into a forum where Hillary gets fed prearranged questions and doesn't have to confront Donald Trump directly. The Washington Post actually ran an article saying that Hillary's health problems may cause her to bow out on the debates. And that would get away from the problem of Hillary's performance vis-a-vis Donald Trump. But from the public perception, it only makes it look like there is a serious problem there, because confronting political opponents is a part of the president's job. And if she can't get up there and do that with Donald Trump, then she's not going to be able to do it with Vladimir Putin or Bashar al-Assad or whoever anywhere in the world.
All right, thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. Now, for some reason, and I have to scratch my head on this one, people who have that Galaxy Note 7 are not responding to the global recall. And that's a very dangerous thing to do. Samsung is recalling these. They're offering refunds or replacement. These batteries are exploding. And the Samsung has gone as far as to say that if you don't turn in your Galaxy Note 7 by a certain date, they're going to remotely disable them all, because apparently it is a very dangerous situation. And I know we all get addicted to our little devices here and we're fondling them and all the rest of it, but really, I mean, knowing that the batteries can explode on this, you got to do the smart thing. Get it turned in, get it replaced. Now, my issue with Samsung, first of all, I mean, we're not saying every Samsung Galaxy Note 7 is going to explode. Only a small percentage of them have. But it's still a real risk. My issue is that this is another reminder that these large corporations are throwing these products out there without them being fully tested, whether it's batteries on the Galaxy Note 7, the software inside Windows 10. They just put it out there to maximize their profitability, and they let the customers work out the problems, which, in the case of exploding batteries, really isn't possible anyway. We need to return product liability to our nation's laws. And a big part of the reason we have so much bad computer hardware and so much bad computer software goes all the way back to the days of the Apple and the IBM PC. And by the way, there's the show out Halt and Catch Fire, which it's getting to be a little bit of a soap opera, but certainly during the first seasons really kind of captured that feel of the emergence of the personal computer industry. But back then, IBM and Apple lobbied the U.S. government for protection from product liability because it was a brand new industry, it was very fragile and delicate, and it needed to be protected. And in that context, it made sense to have limits on product liability for this new industry. But that was back in the 70s. And today, computers are a mature, robust industry. And they shouldn't be allowed to avoid product liability. because that's what incentivizes companies to produce good quality products for you, the end user. And I'll give you a good example. If you own a business and you buy a van, and because of a design defect, that van crashes and you suffer financial harm, you can sue the maker of that van. Like all the people who sued GM for the ignition switch problem, or Volkswagen for the playing games with a diesel. If in your same business you buy a computerized bookkeeping system, and because of a design defect, that computer crashes and wipes out all of your data, and you suffer financial harm, you are not allowed to sue the maker of the computer or the software. And as a result, the manufacturers of computers and software have gotten very reckless. And they put out products that have exploding batteries. They put out software that they know is buggy, and they just sit back and wait for you to work as an unpaid quality assurance worker to identify the problems so they can fix them. If Donald Trump gets to be president and he truly wants to make America great, we have to restore product liability so that we will have products that are high enough in quality, the rest of the world will want to buy them. That's what made America great in the past. We made the best of everything. When I was a kid, made in Japan meant junk. Today it's the reverse, made in Japan or made in China. Good stuff. I mean, they make the iPhones in China. Today, made in America means expensive piece of non-performing junk, and we've got to reverse that. Now, here's another story that came on out from the antimedia.org, where they're calling YouTube on the carpet for censoring journalists who dare to criticize the U.S. government. And in this case, they're going back to that issue of monetization. When you produce a lot of videos for YouTube, you have the option of monetizing them, meaning that YouTube will show advertisements on top of your videos and share the money with you. And YouTube has started canceling monetization agreements with people producing YouTube videos that do not have the U.S. government seal of approval. Of course, in our case, they never allowed monetization to begin with. And if you're seeing ads on our videos on YouTube, they're just keeping all the money for themselves. But we're starting to see that allowing these private corporations to become the main couriers of the Internet has placed us under their control. We're dependent on their view of the world. And we know Facebook is coordinating with Israel to make sure you don't see anything about Israel's treatment of Gaza. We know Google is having meetings with the White House, averaging more than one per week. And now we have YouTube trying to basically punish those who are critical of the U.S. government. All of this a violation of the principle behind that First Amendment, that we have a right to stand up and say the government is behaving badly, or this corporation is behaving badly, or this is a danger to the public health and the general welfare. Because the whole point of that First Amendment is that we have a right to stand up and speak our mind and to criticize bad behavior without fear of repercussion. And now YouTube is bringing repercussion down on the producers of videos that call into question the policies of the U.S. government. That's tyranny and dictatorship right there. Now, a lot of people are starting to be very concerned about this merger between Monsanto and Bayer. It's a $66 billion takeover bid from Bayer for Monsanto. And we already know that both Bayer and Monsanto have very questionable records regarding products and human safety. Bayer was the one that had an AIDS-tainted hemophilia drug. And when they were banned from selling it in the United States, they simply turned around and sold it to other countries where there were no laws against it. And a lot of people came down with AIDS because of this, and Bayer's out there saying, oh, well, we've got medicine for the AIDS patients. We'll make more money off of them. And we all know about Monsanto and their GMO experiments and their glyphosate problems, and now they're merged together. It's like Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein. And with their combined assets and political pull and lobbying muscle, things are going to get very, very dangerous for human beings on this planet. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be back after these few words. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, the movie Vaxxed is getting out there. Clips from it are beginning to appear on YouTube, specific interviews, and it's generating a lot of buzz. And the industry wants to shut it down any way that they can. And the more they scream and holler about what a terrible movie it is, the more people want to see it. It's the Banned in Boston effect is what's going on here. But the reality is the numbers for the vaccine industry are not good. It's been, up until recently, a $30 billion a year business selling medicines to people who are not sick and don't need them. And it's just gotten completely out of control with little babies being told to get 20, 30 shots, mixing them together. Only recently have they actually done a study of what happens when you take 3 or 4 vaccines, mix them together in a single syringe, and inject them into a child. What did they find? Oh, wow, can cause autism. Imagine our surprise. And so, as has come to be the pattern here in the United States of America, when we, the people, do not want to buy a product, the government will mandate it. You will, by golly, buy the vaccines and use them. You will, by golly, buy cell phone headsets. Anything that can't sell on its own merit is made mandatory. And even with that, the numbers are turning against the vaccine scam. With all these scare stories about kids getting autism, this autism rate has just exploded ever since this vaccine situation took off. And more parents are willing to forego social services payments or to take their kids to private schools or homeschool rather than submit to this tyranny of the needle. And so we're looking at this story that came out of Natural News. For Big Pharma, the vaccine ship is sinking. It's because they took something that was a good idea and did work, and they expanded it into a racket. Because they weren't making enough money selling medicines to sick people, and sick people can die and their families can sue because the product didn't work. So the business model became how to sell medicine to perfectly healthy people. And as I've mentioned before, it's operating on the same moral level as the traveling Wild West medicine show salesman. Guy with a brightly painted wagon would drive into the middle of town, crank the stage on the rear back down, and they'd have hoochie coochie girl dancing to draw the crowd on in, and then the pitchman would get on out there and say, out there on the far edges of the Great Plains, there's a scourge that's laying waste to the Native American tribes, and it's a-heading this way. And the only way you will save your life and that of your loved ones is by buying a bottle of Dr. Mike's Fix'ems. And the townspeople would buy the bottle, which probably had pepper oil in it, some alcohol. They'd drink it, feel that they'd done what they needed to do, and the medicine show salesman would take his money and he'd skedaddle before they caught up with him with the tar and feathers. And that's how they're operating today. The fact that it's in a clean and shiny pharmaceutical storefront does not alter it one tiny bit. And people are now pushing back and saying, no, you do not get to decide for me what medicines I'm going to take. I'm not livestock. I am not your property. You do not have that authority to force me to buy products. Because that's what it's all about, forcing you to buy products. Get more money out of you. Generate more economic activity somehow. Planned obsolescence. Mandated products. The entire U.S. economic and governmental system is basically treating all of you like a walking wallet. And every single policy decision they make is all about getting more of your money out of your pocket and into theirs. Look at Obamacare. What was the result of that? Sky-high premiums on health insurance policies, sky-high deductibles that made those policies virtually worthless. It was all about taking more money away from you. And health care, it sounds good. because our government and our economic system are in a serious amount of trouble. They're hopelessly in debt. They're broke because we live under a banking system that by design creates more debt than money with which to pay that debt. That's the problem. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to go ahead and grab a phone call. Greg in Arkansas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Just a correction and an interview you might want to catch about body doubles that was done with the lady Barswell or whatever her name was the next morning after she sent that picture out or whatever. She explains how there's more than likely more than a body double because she refuses to be Clinton's body double, knowing the danger. It's a very neat interview, about 20 minutes.
Which is funny because when the story first broke about this Teresa Barnwell, she quit a job in the advertising industry and makes thousands of dollars a month being a Hillary Clinton impersonator. So, okay, I mean, the secret is out at this point, and this sounds like catch up and trying to get the genie back in the bottle to me.
Okay, well, just let me give a little explanation. Listening to the interview straightens out a whole lot. Yes, she does make lots of money, and she was actually in California at the time of the Clinton episode.
No, she wasn't. She tweeted a picture of Chelsea's Place in New York that very morning on her Twitter account. Okay.
Yes, she explains that. She explained that 2 weeks prior.
I'm sure she has a lot of explanations for the thing, but they're playing catch-up at this one. Okay, Greg, thanks an awful lot for the story, but, the cat is out of the bag. Okay, Hillary Clinton does use body doubles. That certainly was not Hillary Clinton who came out of the house 2 hours after the tripping and falling. For one thing, if you look closely, the foreheads slant differently. Different wedding rings. I mean, the cat's out of the bag here, and the Hillary campaign's going to try and make this go away. Oh, it's just a wacky tinfoil hat conspiracy theory. No, it isn't. And remember, the conspiracy theorists were right about her health, and that's something you need to keep in mind here. All righty, now, we're talking about how government tends to get more and more intrusive over time to justify increased taxation, control over your life. We have more people working in government than in manufacturing in this country, and that is a red warning sign. Most businessmen understand that management should never, ever exceed 10% of the workforce. That's the model they follow over in Japan, for example. Here in the U.S., it's reversed. We have more managers than workforce. And in order to justify people having government jobs and being loyal little government drones, they just go on out and they tinker with things. And not too long ago, over in Orange County, California, there was a little girl, set up a lemonade stand. Now, when I was a kid, we always set up lemonade stands. I used to set up one in front of my Aunt Mary's house there in Loudon, especially during the motorcycle rallies. I, sell a lot of lemonade. That was just part of life. But in Orange County, California, 10-year-old girl, Annabelle Lockwood, had her lemonade stand shut down because it didn't have the required government permits. It didn't have the required liability insurance. It didn't have containers that met government standards. And basically, we have this government ordering this 10-year-old girl to spend $3,500 to get permits and insurance and approved containers for her little lemonade stand. Now, what they're really doing is they're protecting the established corporate, beverage bars and restaurants and the rest of it. That's the whole goal. Crush out entrepreneurial activity because it is a danger to the corporations that want to go on making money doing what they've been doing, the exact same thing for the last 20, 30 years. Now, Paul Joseph Watson has come on out with a very cogent observation regarding the recent claims about Hillary Clinton's health. He points out Donald Trump's medical assessment was done by an independent third party who said that Donald Trump is overweight, which we already knew, and he's taking medications for cholesterol, which a lot of people his age do as well. Hillary's medical assessment is a product of her personal physician, who was already caught lying about Hillary's health. And don't forget, we have that doctor who's Barack Obama's cousin saying that this latest letter doesn't make medical sense. Now, Robert Petrakis is out there saying that, yes, and he's hardly alone, Bernie Sanders may have lost the nomination due to election fraud. And basically saying the firms which were managing the election data and technology were partisan. They were on board with Hillary Clinton. And don't forget, one of the major revelations that came out of yesterday's DNC email dump was the admission that the Democratic National Committee has a system by which they can go into state voter rolls and change them. So, all right, let's grab another phone call. Alan in Texas, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, thank you. I just want to talk about the video of Hillary falling on the 9/11 event. What I wanted to say is that my mom had Parkinson's before she died, and when I saw that video, the minute she stiffened up as they were beginning to move her forward, I recognized the pattern, and I was like, oh my gosh, it was almost like it all came back to me all at once. I was like, oh my God, that's exactly what she used to do. They get all stiff, they can't walk, they get very disoriented, and so I just wanted to kind of give my view of that, because my mom had Parkinson's, and it was terribly debilitating. She had dementia, she couldn't think straight, her body would just become rigid, and she wouldn't be able to walk or anything like that, and I can just say from my experience, that's exactly what I saw in my own family. And I also want to chastise her handlers, because they did a very poor job of moving her. She should not have fallen the way they did. They did a very poor, I guess they were in a hurry to
I think their concern was that she not just collapse outright outside the van, and so after she took that first stumble, I think their thought was just get her in the van any way that we can and get her out of sight.
Yes,
okay.
But I learned to, with my mom, I learned to hold her and walk with her and everything, and there's a way that they can do it, and I think it kind of caught them off guard or something, because I think there's a more, now I still think it would have been obvious, even if they had handled it better, because that stiff movement and everything would have still been obvious that it was Parkinson's and that she was having great amounts of trouble, but it's very sad that they seem to not know exactly how to hold her and get her into the van.
Well, they're thinking in terms of, controlling the public image here, and the impression I got looking at this group around her was that this didn't catch them by surprise. Certainly that young lady who we presume is a doctor of some kind who was having Hillary squeeze her fingers, it just seemed like this is something that she's had to do many, many times before to see what's going on here. And
I agree. This has been going on for quite some time. Anyway, I just wanted to throw my 2 cents in that my mom had Parkinson's, and when I saw that, I was like, yes, that's exactly it. That's exactly the behavior, the problems that come from this type of dysfunction. And anyway, that's all I had to say. So I just want to confirm from somebody who knows the Parkinson's scenario and what it looks like and how it works and everything. And from my experience, I can say, yes, that's what's going on. Anyway, I'll let you go. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks an awful lot. I mean, we do have the people who are anonymously leaking out that she's at stage 3 Parkinson's, and it's certainly not something that is very pleasant to contemplate. But again, it cuts to the issue of somebody actually being capable of doing the job of president. And like I said, if Hillary had polio, like Franklin Roosevelt, or Addison's disease, like John F. Kennedy, it wouldn't be an issue, because the president's job is to make decisions, and as long as the mind is there, that's all that really matters. But in this case, when you're talking about blood clots, concussions, the Fresnel prism in the eyeglasses where she can't focus, the use of blue-tinted glasses to reduce the possibility of seizure from flashing camera strobes, it's all pointing to some really serious questions. And this little dog and pony show that they put on today I don't think is going to convince anybody. In fact, I went back and looked at one of the YouTube videos of Hillary's performance in Greensboro, and the comments were mostly negative. They're not buying this, that Hillary is just fine and hunky-dory. They're not believing Hillary's personal doctor's comments. There's a real question there, and it's a serious problem. If Hillary is suffering stage 3 Parkinson's, then she's on the verge of dementia, and she's going to have good moments, and she's going to have bad moments. But the good moments are going to get fewer and farther between. Now then, getting on over to this Chelsea Manning situation. As you know, Chelsea Manning started a hunger strike. The Army has agreed to provide sex change operation. Chelsea has stopped the strike. Julian Assange, who's fighting his own extradition battle, is out there saying that if Chelsea Manning is released, that Julian Assange, will surrender to U.S. authorities. And I have to applaud Julian Assange for this. I've had my doubts about him in the past, but Chelsea Manning is in prison because WikiLeaks blew it and didn't protect the identity. And so this is a very generous, honorable gesture on Assange's part. Of course, the U.S. government is going to say, we have to have both of you. You know, whistleblowers are a threat to the national security, meaning they're a threat to the personal political fortunes of our leaders. Getting on back to Europe, we're seeing this story. There's a French market research and polling agency, IFOP, and they just did a survey of the French people and found an overwhelming majority do not want any more migrants left into their country. They've had it. They're fed up with all of this stuff. George Soros' goal of a new world order, global society where we're all blended together, didn't work out due to human nature, which is something the liberals don't really understand because it doesn't fit in with their political ideology. Boris Johnson is saying that at this point, let's just turn the migrant boats back to Libya. Don't even let them on shore. Now, in this next story, I'm beginning to think I should have moved forward with my Rivero 2016 campaign. You could hardly do any worse. There's a heavy metal band in Norway called Dark Throne. The front man, as a joke, ran a campaign for election to the local council, and now he's stuck because he won. And he actually got elected to office. And apparently his campaign sign was, please don't vote for me, and everybody did. Because they're fed up with all the establishment career politicians. I think that's funny. Reminds me of when Sonny Bono became mayor of Palm Springs, and the first thing he did was fire this city clerk who'd been giving him a hard time over some required permit. And then Sonny Bono made a lot of waves and made a lot of noise, and he too died under somewhat questionable circumstances. He was just skiing down the hill, and a tree leapt out and bit him. And Sonny Bono was an expert skier, by the way, for those of you who followed that story. Now, a former U.S. Treasury Secretary, Larry Summers, has published a newspaper article saying that all of the new regulations and protections that the U.S. government put into place following 2008 are worthless. They have not made the U.S. banking system any safer. What they should have done was reintroduce Glass-Steagall, but that's something Wall Street didn't want. So the U.S. government, as is typical, passes a lot of laws that have absolutely no effect, and then they stand up there in election season saying, I passed this law that did this and this and this. Because it's all about that illusion. But Larry Summers is saying right now, America's banks may be at greater risk now than they were at the point where the mortgage-backed security fraud melted down. Everyone looking around is seeing all these danger signs. And we're seeing the continuation of the manipulation of the stock market, trying to keep that up for the next 54 days to help the incumbents stay in power. And I did an interview on Money Metal's show earlier today where they were talking about this horrible corner the Federal Reserve has gotten itself in, because it wants to keep rates low so Wall Street can keep pumping and churning that stock market, making it look good. But at the same time, keeping rates low is accelerating other countries' moves away from the U.S. dollar. But if they raise the rates, it could crash the stock market, and it certainly would not help the incumbents going into November. So they're really in a corner of their own making. And we were talking about the gold market. Now, gold and silver has seen a little bit of a price increase. They're still trying to keep that down. And part of the reason for that is the paper gold commodities market is still leveraged literally hundreds to one. When there's a gold run, it's going to get ugly. And most of the people who think they own gold because they've got a paper certificate saying you own gold, they're going to find out it's not really there. Because it's been run as a fractional reserve system. They do not actually have the physical gold for all those paper contracts. Mostly when you go on in and you want to redeem your contract, they'll offer you a deal. Extend the contract and we'll give you a little vigorish, a little bump. And most people are going for that. But at some point, when the decay of the value of the dollar itself becomes obvious, that's not going to work any longer. And there's going to be a gold run. If you are investing in silver and gold, and I strongly, strongly recommend that you do that, get the physical metal in your possession under your control. Those paper contracts are just another scam. When the gold run happens, most of the people holding those paper contracts, that's all they're going to be left with. A paper contract saying that somewhere out there in the Twilight Zone, there's a gold bar or a gold coin with your name on it, and we don't know where it is, but you've got the paper, and that makes it all okay. Remember when Germany asked for its gold back from the New York Fed and got the big stall? And there was that CNBC editor did an editorial saying it doesn't really matter if the gold is there or not. As long as we have it on a paper record, it's still there, and it can be traded and leveraged and rehypothecated, and it's all make-believe virtual money. And it's all going to implode. I strongly recommend investment in physical metals. The physical metals, not the paper contracts. It's a disaster waiting to happen. Got to take a break here. We'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And, of course, Hillary's people are out there saying, she's perfectly healthy. She's perfectly healthy. And there's no such thing as a body double. And they're trying to recover from this, and it's not working. Over in Las Vegas, a lot of people have correctly pointed out that the bookmakers in Las Vegas are often more accurate than the polling organizations, because the bookmakers are there to make money, and the polling organizations are often there trying to impose a bias on their results. So apparently, Hillary's odds of winning the White House, according to the Las Vegas bookmakers, have plunged 14 points. That's really, really ugly. Now, if you live on the other side of the globe from the United States, there's going to be a penumbral lunar eclipse tomorrow night. It will not be visible in the United States or South America. It won't even be visible from here in Hawaii. But Australia, Asia, and China. And it's not a total eclipse, but it's a pretty significant penumbral eclipse. And it's the last lunar eclipse of this year, penumbral or otherwise, for all you astronomy fans out there, of which I am one. You know, big astronomy fan here. Now, tonight, China is launching its second Earth-orbiting satellite laboratory, the Tiangong-2. And this new laboratory is going to allow astronauts to stay in flight for up to 30 days. It can refuel propellant while in orbit, and it has a whole range of new experiments, including what they're calling a cold atom space clock that measures time with the estimated precision of more than a trillionth of a second, from which I presume they're going to be doing another verification of general relativity. And so that will be interesting. Good for the Chinese, good for the Chinese getting this stuff up there. And waxing nostalgic, it reminds me of when our nation had a serious space program going. And I'm not diminishing what SpaceX has accomplished as a private company. But when I look at what NASA has become, it's just a thin shadow of what it was during the Apollo years. And most of their funding now is to come on up with stuff to support the claim about human-caused global warming. There are no more major missions funded right now in terms of spacecraft to other world. They're basically just it. They're marking time here. And again, I hope if Donald Trump does win the White House, he recognizes the need for a new civilian technology incubator with which to develop new processes, new materials, new industries, new products. And remember that the tech boom of the 70s, 80s, and 90s all grew out of going to the moon. And if we're ever going to make America great, these other countries that we gave away our manufacturing to, they're not going to give it back. We have to leapfrog forward, and that will require a civilian technology incubator, and that's why I think we need a new space program, whether they call it NASA or something else. But we're going to need that to make America great again. There's the music. Time for me to get out of here, get something useful done with the rest of the day, chase the gecko all over the back wall. Remember, you are all a part of the independent media. Take what you learn here, and at my website, share it with everybody that you know. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.